We always think of the Black Death as this apocalyptic world-ending event, and it was. But what if it wasn't just an ending? What if it was also a totally radical new beginning? That's what we're going to dig into today. We're going to look at what happened after the plague, how the people who survived tried to build a whole new world from the ashes, and, well, how they ended up changing everything.
Really, it all comes down to one simple and honestly terrifying question. What happens when half the world just dies? The answer, as the survivors were about to find out, was going to reshape their entire society right from the ground up.
All right, so let's set the scene. Our story starts in this new, kind of empty world. Just try to imagine the quiet, that eerie, unsettling silence that hangs over a place where not long ago there were people everywhere. So let's put you right in the shoes of a survivor. It's England, maybe around 1380. You made it through. But the world you grew up in, it's gone. Villages, places like Little Wickham, that used to be bustling with life, are now just ghost towns. You've got empty houses, overgrown fields. The only sound you hear is the wind whistling through homes that used to be full of families. I mean, the scale of the loss here is just staggering. In some places, the population dropped by a whopping 70%. That village I mentioned, Little Wickham, it went from about 200 people down to just 60. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, for those 60 people who survived, something really strange, a kind of paradox, started to bubble up from all that grief.
For the people who made it through, suddenly, everything changed. Okay, so before the plague, if you were a peasant, your life was incredibly hard. We're talking sleeping on packed dirt floors, wearing clothes made of rough hemp. But after, with so much land and so many goods just left behind, life actually got better, a lot better. Suddenly, you might be moving into a house with real wooden floors. You could afford warm wool clothes. And, this is huge, you got to keep way more of the crops you grew. A whole new world of opportunity, completely unexpected, was opening up.
And you know what comes with opportunity? Confidence. For the very first time, everyday people were getting a taste of what real power felt like. And guess what? They weren't afraid to use it. Now, this new attitude was absolutely shocking to the nobility. I mean, can you imagine a peasant walking up to his lord and saying, "Yeah, I'll work for you, but it's going to be 3 shillings and I want my Sundays off." Before the plague, saying something like that would get you whipped. Easy. But now it was a negotiation. Because with so few workers left, the whole power dynamic had been turned on its head. So the ruling class, they were freaking out about this. They were losing control. So what did they do? King Edward's court tried to basically turn back time with something called the Statute of Laborers. It was a royal decree, and its whole purpose was to force wages back down to pre-plague levels and, put the common folk firmly back in their place.
Yeah, it didn't work at all. When the king's men, these royal commissioners, showed up in villages trying to enforce the old wages, they were met with straight-up defiance. It started out kind of small, people burning tax records, setting fire to granaries, but the message couldn't have been clearer. The survivors had tasted this new freedom, and there was no way they were giving it up.
So you've got this simmering discontent, right? Well, it was about to boil over and explode into open conflict. We're talking a full-blown rebellion that ends with a really stunning betrayal. So, under leaders like this guy, Wat Tyler, tens of thousands of peasants and craftsmen got organized. And their demands were clear and they were radical. This wasn't just about getting a pay raise anymore. Oh no. They wanted a complete overhaul of society. They wanted an end to serfdom, to get rid of the hated poll tax for good, and they wanted corrupt officials to be punished. And this all came to a head over just a few crazy days in June of 1381. On the 13th, the rebels actually storm London. The very next morning, the king, who's just a kid, only 14 years old, King Richard meets them and agrees to everything they're asking for. It looks like a total victory. But then that same afternoon, things escalate. The rebels storm the Tower of London and execute the Archbishop of Canterbury. This isn't just a rebellion anymore. It's turning into a revolution. So the next day, things are incredibly tense. At a meeting, the rebel leader, Wat Tyler, is killed right there. The crowd sees this and they just surge forward, ready to tear everyone apart. And in that moment of pure chaos, the young King Richard does something absolutely extraordinary. He spurs his horse and rides directly into this angry mob. He shouts, "I will be your king and your captain. Your grievances shall be heard." He literally offered to lead the rebellion himself. It looked like an astonishing win. The king himself was on their side. And then came the betrayal.
Because Richard's promise? It was all a trick. A brilliant but ruthless one. He led the rebels out of the city to a nearby field, where they were suddenly surrounded by royal troops. And once the crowd was disarmed and totally disorganized, the king just declared all of his promises void. He said they were made under pressure, so they didn't count. The rebellion was then brutally, and I mean brutally, crushed.
So that's it, right? The revolution failed, the leaders were executed, all the promises were broken. But that is not where this story ends, because the change that these people demanded, well, it turned out to be unstoppable.
Which brings us back to that big question. So, did the revolution actually fail? I mean, on paper, yeah, absolutely. It was a total failure. But in reality, the story was a long way from being over. You have to look at the quiet victories that happened next. That poll tax they hated so much, it was never collected again. The lords, still desperate for workers, had no choice but to offer better wages and better conditions. See, the simple laws of supply and demand couldn't be stopped by some royal decree. And over the next few decades, serfdom, the very foundation of the old medieval world, it just withered away. A new era, one where you could actually move up in the world, had begun.
And that is the ultimate irony here, isn't it? The rebellion itself was crushed, but the world it demanded was born anyway. The uprising failed, but the revolution succeeded. Not with a bang, but with this quiet, unstoppable force of economic and social change. It just goes to show that sometimes, even when you lose, the seeds of a new world are planted, because you just can't stop an idea when its time has finally come.